Hello, today's guest is on a mission to empower people to live an abundant life free from false beliefs. In this spirit, she wrote the book, The Abundance Code, How to Bust 7 Money Myths for a Rich Life Now, and has spearheaded the Abundance Code documentary in March 2016 to help people everywhere make a shift to the abundance mindset and seek joint solutions to the most pressing challenges facing our planet. Trained as an economist and statistician, where she received a scholarship from the Japanese Ministry of Education, Monbusho, and co-founded and ran an English school, Julie then went on to work at the Reserve Bank of Australia and then Macquarie Bank, also in Australia, and in 2001 co-founded the Trading Pursuits Group, a financial markets education company where she is the managing director. She's got over 20 years of experience in analyzing global economic trends and financial market conditions, and is the co-author of the book Taming the Beasts: Secrets to Profit in Volatile Bull and Bear Markets. That's a mouthful. She studied various aspects of economics, statistics, finance, and has spent 15 years of postgraduate experience in the financial markets. She also happens to be a very dear friend of mine, and we chat on Skype very regularly. Now, although we have similar backgrounds, because I have a background in finance too, we actually end up speaking quite a lot about mindset. And Julie's been helping me a lot with mindset lately, so thank you. Now, she's shared some really great insights with me, and I'd love to have her share these insights with you too, because I found them to be so valuable. So I'm delighted to welcome Julie Carins from tradingpursuits.com. So great to have you on the show. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Ash. It's a pleasure.
It's an absolute honor. So, Julie, let's talk to our listeners about why you think mindset is so critical to making an impact on anything we do. You shared a very moving story when we first met about how you had this relationship with money and how it played out in your life and how you eventually resolved it when you addressed your mindset. So could you share that story with us?
Sure. So I have to go back, if you don't mind, into my backstory, because it all started in childhood, as it does with so many of us. You know, most people take on their mental conditioning and their subconscious belief set by the age of 8 or 10. So if you want to look at where the patterns that you're locked in came from, that's really where you have to go back to. So in my case, I actually had a very prosperous upbringing.
Yep.
My parents were quite wealthy. My father was a very successful surgeon with a double specialty, and they had invested very well in real estate. And so by the age of about 40, my parents had pretty much achieved, I think, most of the dreams that they had in life. They had a beautiful architect-designed waterfront mansion that we were all living in. They had a couple of airplanes. They were hobby pilots, so they owned 2 airplanes. We used to fly everywhere in our holidays in our own airplanes. They were collecting art, having fabulous 70s parties. Life was fantastic, and really nothing to complain about, which makes the next stage of the unfolding story a little bit odd, because they both started to drink quite a bit at that point. And really, once they had achieved that level of success is when their drinking really started to accelerate. And within a few years, from the age of about 8 for me, through to 11, the drinking got really, really intense. And when I was 11, my parents broke up. And within a couple of years, all of the money was somehow gone. I ended up living with my mother. She declared bankruptcy. And I went from this very privileged upbringing. And I mean, my brother was attending a very exclusive boarding school that Prince Andrew went to. My sister and I were doing show jumping and dressage and, parading around in the riding habit with the red jacket and the black velvet lapels. And, it was this very sort of do all the things that rich people do kind of lifestyle that my parents seemed desperate to show the world, this wonderful polished exterior. And then on the inside, it was just totally crumbling for them and for our family.
Just a quick question, Julie. It's interesting that you say that the alcoholism or the affinity for alcohol started to happen around the time they kind of, that achieved everything.
Yeah.
It almost tells me that, we all need to have
There's
a purpose,
something going on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll come back to, what I think that is. Of course, it's all conjecture on my part. And, they might have a completely different opinion about it. But the reality of what happened is that they broke up. All the money disappeared somewhere, not even sure where. My mother declared bankruptcy, and I went from this very privileged upbringing to the shoe on the other foot, or as I like to say, it was like getting, a bad roll in a game of snakes and ladders.
Right, yeah.
Like it's all good, and then you're all the way down to the bottom of the socioeconomic ladder.
Yeah, that's a good analogy, actually.
Yeah. So that was a shock, a total shock for me. And I think, my mother declared bankruptcy when I was 12 or 13. And I think for a couple of years, I was just depressed. And I basically started skipping school a lot, hanging around with not a great crowd, smoking a lot of pot, just checking out in every way possible, drinking, smoking cigarettes. I started smoking when I was 13.
If you were in school, I would have thought that you would have been relatively unaffected by the financial impact. So I'm just interested to understand a bit more about it, why that affected you so much. Or was it because your parents were kind of not really sheltering you from the situation because they too were suffering from it?
Yeah, well, I mean, to say that the breakup was traumatic is an understatement. All kinds of drama happened.
Right.
Crazy drama. And, I actually think that I was probably in a state of PTSD shock.
Oh, my goodness.
For a while, that then kind of evolved into just a general depression.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Look, it's what happened. And as you'll find out, I gained a lot of lessons from that experience. So I spent a couple of years just kind of feeling sorry for myself and not going to school, skipping school a lot, just not being engaged with my life. And then at about age 15, and I don't know what caused this, but I suddenly just went, you know what? I have experienced this life of wealth, extraordinary wealth, and I have experienced this life of the complete opposite. We had no money, being assisted by welfare, and never could have anything that I wanted, basically. And I went, I think I like being wealthy.
That's a pretty nice way to be.
And I thought, well, the only person who's going to figure this out for me is me.
Right.
So I went from basically not going to school. I think the year that I changed my mind about being engaged with my life, in the first semester of that year, I had 56 days of absence from school.
Wow. Okay.
And then I just went, okay, no, I actually have to do this. So then I started getting serious about my studies. After about a year, managed to convince my mother to let me move to Australia, which is where my father was living at the time. I grew up in Canada. So my mom lives in Canada.
But your dad was Australian originally, wasn't he?
Well, both my parents were Australian originally. They immigrated to Canada when I was 3 months old.
Okay.
And so my father had gone back to Australia, and I went to live with him and got very serious about my studies in the sort of last couple of years of high school, and then went to university in Australia. And back then, university in Australia was free.
Yeah.
So that was a big draw card for me.
Well, it's still almost free.
Yeah, it's not expensive,
Not
definitely
as bad as the States.
compared to the States or even Canada.
Okay.
So that was kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Go to university in Australia. And I studied finance, economics, statistics, mathematics, everything that I thought was what you should study in order to get rich. Mm-hmm. That was 100% my goal. I got a scholarship, a cadetship with the Reserve Bank, and then a scholarship with the Japanese Ministry of Education. I went to Japan, did a master's of business administration and finance, learned Japanese, ran an English school while I was there, bought an English school and ran that and then sold it. And came back to Australia, worked in the banking industry, worked for the Reserve Bank, worked for Macquarie Bank in their funds management area, and then started my own company with my business partner, teaching people how to trade financial markets.
Mm-hmm.
So I went from, this not having anything really to going on a trajectory, I guess, career trajectory that made sense to me, that was the standard proper trajectory to get money, make money, and be successful.
Yeah.
And I was successful on that path. And I did build up a significant amount of wealth. I did what my parents did. I invested in real estate. I had a business. I, had good cash flow. And that was all very successful. Then I sort of went on my if you call what happened in my childhood roller coaster ride number 1, I began the downside of roller coaster ride number 2.
Oh man.
Which is I invested in some things that I really didn't understand.
Yeah.
My business partner and I went into a chain of flower shops,
Mm-hmm.
not just one, like 5, and Indian takeaway restaurants.
Okay.
We had a couple of Indian takeaway restaurants, and we managed to lose most of our real estate wealth that we had accumulated, which, had been a significant amount of wealth. We had nearly 30 investment properties at one stage.
Wow.
So that was a big lesson.
Mm-hmm.
We came out of that and went, all right, let's just focus on what we know, which is how to teach people how to trade and invest in the financial markets. Let's just focus on our business.
Core competency.
Right. So we built that up. That was going well. And then 2008, global financial crisis.
Of course. Yes.
Happened. And for various reasons, we were close to bankruptcy again. And at that point, you could call that roller coaster ride number 3. At that point, I started to get the sense that there was a pattern.
Well, fair enough. It does take 3 rounds to see a pattern. I think that's fair.
It was
I think that's fair.
Wait a minute. What is going on here? And something I guess I had an epiphany. Something really good happened.
But wait a second. The GFC wasn't a pattern to do with you, though. So can you really say that was part of the pattern?
The reason we came unstuck in the GFC was about decisions that we'd made.
Okay.
We didn't actually lose money in the markets.
Okay.
We had a problem because we had a bunch of short-term debt that needed to be rolled over, and no bank would lend to you during the GFC aftermath. Right. So it was to do with choices that we'd made about leveraging up. So I can definitely track it back to...
I see what you mean now. Okay, yes, got it.
A high risk, higher than normal risk tolerance that really kind of came unstuck.
Gotcha.
So at any rate, that was an incredibly scary time for me. And a couple of other things were going on in my personal life that made me sit up and go, wait, what's going on? One was that my daughter was really sick. She got whooping cough or something like that, basically.
Right.
And got very, very ill.
How old was she then?
She was 4.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty nasty when it happens at that age.
Yeah. And then just as she was recovering from that, her appendix burst.
Oh, boy. It burst.
And so it burst. Yeah. So she ended up in hospital on these really heavy-duty antibiotics for a couple of weeks and was really touch and go, basically. So that was one thing going on. Then also my partner was basically going through a bit of a gender crisis, and he eventually decided that he wanted to become a woman.
Mm-hmm.
So this was all going on in my personal life while my financial life was completely imploding. And it was just like, very intense.
Right.
And I had this intense feeling of terror, like in my gut. And I remember just one day checking in with that terror and going, I recognize this feeling. I remember this feeling. This is how I felt at 11, when my whole family life imploded. My parents were losing everything. My personal relationships were completely more stressful than you can imagine, really. And I went, wow, I wonder if I think this is how it's supposed to go.
Right.
I wonder if this is, this is my normal.
And if this is what you expect on some level.
Right. Exactly. These roller coaster rides I've been having with wealth in my personal life. Is that happening because I think that's how it works, how life works? And that one thought was the epiphany that I needed. And that allowed me to go, okay, wait, what's going on in my internal belief system? And how can I change that? And I started really getting into the science of the subconscious mind. I read a wonderful book someone had given me around that time called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy. It's a book that was written in 1963. It's kind of an old classic. And that set me on the path of going, all right, this might be a subconscious programming issue. I can certainly point to lots of external circumstances through these 3 different roller coaster rides that explains each one of them individually.
Okay.
But put together, they represent a pattern. And is that a pattern that I want to have continue for the rest of my life? Because I was 40 at this stage. I was about the age my parents had been when they'd lost everything. That was another factor in recognizing where the pattern might have come from.
Now, Julie, you just said something very important that I want to shine a light on, because I tend to make this mistake. I always tend to attribute external events to things and don't necessarily recognize these as a reflection of my own thinking or mindset as I probably should, as often as I should. Now, that's not because I don't want to take responsibility for the things as much as because I feel that it's a bit too woo-woo to say, I'm projecting these things. Whether or not there is a link between your mindset and those events that are happening, it doesn't hurt to just try and look at your mindset anyway, which is something I'm learning to do now.
Yeah. And look, any one event we can explain away. 2 events with very similar sort of patterns. 3, you really got to start going, hang on.
Right.
This is coming up again and again. Maybe in a different form, but it's coming up again and again.
It never hurts to look at your mindset and readdress it.
Well, the thing that really kind of sealed the deal for me in terms of really acknowledging that this stuff has a powerful influence was because I was also at the same time working with clients in our business. So we were teaching people how to trade financial markets.
Yeah.
And particularly when it comes to beliefs about money, if you want to bounce up or push up against your beliefs about money, try trading.
Yes, right.
If you have a red hot button somewhere regarding your money beliefs, then trading is like pushing that button over and over and over again.
Yeah. I've never been given to trading, I must confess. I'm much more of the Warren Buffett type of approach, long-term investing and value-based investing. So I don't really know much about trading, but I know enough to know that, yes, it will make you question your beliefs about money.
Right.
It'll test your relationship.
And it's very triggering. And so what I was experiencing, because one of my jobs in the business was to help people who were kind of having trouble applying what it was that we were teaching to the real world markets. They were having trouble being successful with that application. And, what I realized was, well, generally speaking, knowledge wasn't the issue. Everybody had gone through the same training that we had provided, right? And it wasn't training that was difficult to comprehend. So everybody had the same knowledge that all out of our clients. And everybody was trading the same markets, right? So those two things are constant. And some people were making it work, and then other people just couldn't make it work. And so part of my job was to help the people who were having trouble making it work. And what I found was the blockage, as I said, it wasn't knowledge and it wasn't the markets. It was an opportunity, in other words. It was that they were doing things to sabotage their own success.
Okay.
And it wasn't always the same thing, you know, but it was always something. There was always they'd deviate from the rules somehow, or, you know, they'd ignore some piece of evidence, or, you know, something to sabotage their success. And when I started to dig a little bit with those people, what I came up against was their beliefs about money.
Okay.
That was the thing. You know, some people, for example, believe that you have to work hard for your money.
Okay.
That's a very common belief.
Right.
And so if you're trading and it starts to come very easily,
I see.
that totally triggers that belief.
Right.
Or another very common belief that would be triggered by trading often was the belief that money is easy come and then easy go.
Right.
So if you have a big inflow, then you do something to make sure you have a big outflow. You know, like you have a great trade, it goes well, you take your profits appropriately, awesome, high five. The very next one you do, you break all the rules.
Now, here's a really interesting point. I just recently interviewed one of the assistant professors of psychiatry from Harvard, and it was about the power of unfocus and productivity. But an interesting point he made was that a lot of the time, by the time a thought has arrived at our conscious mind, our subconscious mind has already thought it, and we are often just becoming aware of a thought that we are already acting on.
Yes,
now,
exactly.
That is so interesting, isn't it? Because we think that, oh, I didn't think it, so it couldn't have happened. But actually, you might be thinking it at a subconscious level. You just haven't registered it consciously, but you're still behaving on that belief.
100%. I mean, the analogy I use for that is like, imagine you have a glass table and you have like a metal figurine on top of the table, and you have a powerful magnet underneath the table, right? The magnet is your subconscious mind. The figurine is your conscious mind, right? And so you move the magnet left, right? That's your subconscious mind. You're already moving left. What your conscious mind goes is, hey, I think it'd be a good idea to go left because of A, B, and C reasons.
That's a
but you're
great
already
analogy.
Going left.
Yeah.
You're
so your conscious
going
mind is using
you're
confirmation
just rationalizing
bias.
what you're already doing.
Yeah, your conscious mind is just rationalizing what your subconscious. That's really interesting, and that there might establish a more concrete link with our subconscious minds and external events, because maybe we are influencing events which we perceive as external events, but are actually just coming from our actions.
Well, you know, we're working in an incredibly complex system, right? And there are millions of decisions we make every day.
Yeah.
So tracking, you know, an event outcome back to the 1 million decisions that got you to that place on your decision tree is impossible. Right? It's impossible. So uncovering, you know, or verifying that it's subconscious sabotage is actually quite difficult, you know. But when you have a pattern, that's a big clue.
That's a big
It's
clue.
a big, big clue. And the pattern can just be something like, I've been trying really hard and everything I do, I'm just frustrated at every turn. You know, it's just not working out, and I can't figure out why stuff doesn't work out for me. When I look at, you know, my friend and it just, everything falls into place for them and they find it so easy. And for me, it's always difficult and frustrating and hard. What's that? Well, it's probably a belief.
Okay.
It's probably a belief. So, okay. So let me just go back to my story for a second. So 2008, I have this epiphany. everything's falling apart in my personal life. Everything's falling apart in my financial life. And I just have this big aha moment and I go, right, it is time for me to get into my subconscious and rewrite some of this code. And so I start doing that. As I said, I read the book, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind. I read voraciously on the topic. There's a whole bunch of resources once you get onto this idea. And I started reprogramming my subconscious. And what ended up happening was within 4 years, and this is the 4 years following the global financial crisis, so it wasn't exactly a boom time economically. Our company went from being over $3 million in debt, with that debt kind of basically due now,
right,
to debt-free with $3 million of cash in the bank. So that was a $6 million turnaround in 4 years.
Right.
And I completely attribute that to mindset.
Wow. Okay, so let's talk about the how then. How did you take it from the 3 million in debt to 3 million in the black? Can you break down a process for our listeners?
Sure. I mean, there were lots of things to it. Basically, there was securing alternative sources of finance that were not banks. So there was a little bit of that. About $750,000 we managed to secure from other sources. There was rescheduling debt from that, creditors at that time were happy to get their money back. But we actually offered them their money back plus 15%. And we did fulfill on that if they would just extend the time frame for us.
Right.
So just going into negotiations with a solution, with a positive mindset, hey, we're going to pay back. And at that time, people were really happy to be getting paid back.
Right.
And a lot of people
you just said something very important. You said going into it with a positive mindset. Now, if you didn't have a positive mindset, it would not have occurred to you to go to them with that proposition of, I'll give it to you with 15% interest. Although, if you think about it in retrospect, it makes perfect sense, because what were their options really? I mean, you were going to go bankrupt and they just didn't get any money back, or they just extended the debt and they got 15% more back. So there's no real choice. But the point is that if you had a negative mindset, you'd have just thrown up your hands and gone, oh, I'm never going to get out of this. I'm $3 million in debt. I'm just going to declare bankruptcy. And you start to give energy to that reality. Whereas when you insisted on a more positive mindset and a positive outlook, you then gave energy to the alternative reality that I can dig myself out of this. Sure, it's not going to be easy, but it can be done. And here is a way.
Yeah. And another thing we did was go back to, well, what is it that our clients have been asking for years that we haven't given them? And in our case, it was an intensive 12-month coaching program.
Yep.
And so we just launched that product and went, okay, well, we're going to step up. And there were reasons why we hadn't wanted to do it in the past, but we went, all right, now's the moment. We're going to do this intensive coaching program. And it brought in a whole bunch of revenue.
So what were the reasons you didn't want to do it? And what was the reason now that you were willing to do it, that 12-month program?
The reason we hadn't wanted to do it in the past was mainly just the intensity of it. Like it represented a lot of work for us and our team. And we were already traveling all over the country doing seminars and live events and all that sort of thing. So it just was something that previously we felt like we just didn't have the bandwidth for, but we dug deep because we were in a crisis situation and we went, all right, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
And we're going to over-deliver.
Because you were committed to a positive outcome and you weren't going to give in to the bankruptcy option.
Exactly.
Right.
And then the other thing we did was we released a whole new training product, which was looking at, well, what is the new reality of the markets? And at that time, markets were very volatile. That was the new reality. And there are certain strategies in trading that you can use that are brilliant in a volatile market. Okay. And so we released a training course about how can you not only survive, but thrive in your trading in a volatile market. And people loved it. So we sold truckloads of that product. So
Was that including things like, say, short selling and those kinds of strategies, or?
yeah, it was option writing.
Okay.
Yeah, and using both leverage and option writing, but that's getting into the technicalities of it.
Okay.
You know, we taught fairly sophisticated stuff,
Yeah.
but we taught it to people who, you know, didn't have financial market degrees.
Right,
Really,
right.
it was designed for people. Anyone could learn what we taught. We would just basically essentialize it and systemize it.
Sure.
And yeah. So all that added up to a $6 million turnaround in 4 years.
Amazing.
So, but every one of those things, you know, being creative enough to come up with a new product, having a positive enough mindset to, you know, come up with a creative solution to the rescheduling of the debt, being willing to dig deep with respect to, you know, what we offer our clients, all of that you can track back to your mindset. Are you in a frame of mind that is expansive and solution oriented, or are you in a frame of mind that is contracted about fear and scarcity and about, you know, being overwhelmed? And mindset is what makes the difference between those two states of mind,
So
especially in a crisis.
Absolutely. So how does one who has a tendency to have the contracted mindset develop the tendency to have the more expanded outlook and have a spaciousness around their thinking to be able to be more creative, to be biased towards a more positive outcome rather than feel drawn towards a negative outcome?
Yeah. Well, I think, again, it really comes down to your belief framework. So one of the analogies I like recently is, you know, life is kind of like a board game, right?
Yeah.
And with every board game comes a set of rules, and the rules kind of determine the gameplay. You know, they determine whether it's challenging, they determine whether it's frustrating, they determine whether it's easy to win or hard to win.
Yeah.
And like that, most of us have an internal set of rules. And for most people, the internal set of rules is not very favorable to winning this game, this, you know, game of life, I suppose, this succeeding in life game. Because the rules are things like money is hard to make.
Yep.
You have to work hard for your money. You know, time is money. So the only way to make money is to exchange your time for it. The rich get richer, the poor get poorer.
Right.
So like it's like some kind of closed club, and if you're not in, you're out, and that's how it is forever. You know, there's no way in.
And these are all commonly used phrases in our culture, so they are continuously reinforcing these beliefs.
They are programmed into us from an early age. Money is easy come, easy go. More money, more problems. So money comes with, if you get more money, it comes with dramas. It comes with, you know, complexity. It comes with hassle. Money won't make you happy. A lot of people have that programmed. I think that this was what undid my parents, is they really expected money to make them happy. And
well, money alone won't make you happy, but I think money is important for happiness in today's world.
The thing is that the subconscious mind is very, it's almost like, you know, in computer coding, you have to be very specific.
Yes, right? I agree. Yes, right.
It's not like it encourages range of subtlety, right? So the subconscious is like that. It's like it is our automated system, right? So one little bit of miscoding can have terrible consequences, just like a bug in a software program, right? And so money won't make you happy, right? How do you code that?
Yeah.
Do you code that as it takes more than just money to make you happy?
No,
that's quite subtle.
Yes.
Or do you code it as money not equal happy?
Yes, because the brain, that's right, because my brain kind of automatically leans towards, well, money won't make you happy means money will make me unhappy. But that's not at all what that phrase is saying.
No, that's not what it's supposed to be, but it's miscoded often.
I totally agree. It's a bit like saying, don't think of a pink elephant. you know,
Right.
you are going to think of the pink elephant. If
Right.
instead you said, think of a beautiful blue sky, your mind is going to hear blue sky and think.
Yeah. So these miscodings happen all the time. And the other thing to understand is that we take these things in when our brains are developing at a very young age. And if they go in the wrong way, well, we're not old enough to make those distinctions.
Absolutely.
You know, they just go in the wrong way.
Yeah.
And then that plays out forever more unless you update the code.
Right.
That's why that's so vital. But anyway, so, money doesn't make you happy, I think was pretty critical to my parents' implosion, because they kind of got to their dream, all of their dreams achieved by the age of 40, and it didn't make them happy.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, we've got no excuses now. Like, we can't put our happiness off to the future because we don't have this or we don't have that. Like, you can say, oh, I'm not happy yet because I don't have the mansion, or I'm not happy yet because I don't have the airplane, but when they got all that stuff, it was like, and I'm not happy, and and then, so then you're in a position of like stuffing down that,
Yeah.
And I think they stuffed down the with a whole bunch of alcohol.
Yeah.
In their case.
Gotcha.
Yeah, because it was a bit of a crisis.
Okay.
Like, I don't know what to do. I got nowhere else to go. My belief system doesn't accommodate this.
Now, the good news is the human brain, at least according to most recent studies, has a lot of plasticity. So, we can adapt. That said, it's a lot easier to be born and raised around better messaging than try and change the messaging later in your life. But hey, let's face it, we've all got what we've got. And if you're listening to this episode, you've got a certain mindset. I think the first step really is to try and become self-aware and recognize patterns. And I've talked a lot about mindfulness in previous episodes, and maybe I'll link to a few of them in the articles about it. In fact, our common friend Sonia Simone just liked an article I wrote on mindfulness, which I was very chuffed about.
Yeah, awesome. Totally. Awareness is the first step. Absolutely. Yeah. And then there's actually a method for reprogramming your subconscious beliefs. So this stuff is not set in stone by any means, but it is set in stone until you recognize you've got it, right? Like, if you're not even aware that you have this problem, then you're not going to do anything about it.
Exactly. It takes a certain amount of humility, perhaps, and a little bit of being able to step back to become self-aware. And I've been practicing mindfulness on and off for several years, and while it's very simple, it is not easy. And the main reason it's not easy is because you need to keep remembering to be self-aware, which can be a bit of a challenge. That said, the way in which I practice it is to try and be aware of my breath and use it as an anchor almost, and watch my thoughts, but not to the point where I can't function, but more use your breath as an opportunity, as a trigger to remind yourself to be aware. And the other interesting thing with the breath that a lot of Eastern philosophies believe in is that the breath is very intimately related to the mind. And so when your mind is agitated, your breath is shallow and fast. And when your breath is deep and slow, your mind tends to be calmer. So the key here is you can regulate your mind to some extent with your breath, which is why when we take 3 deep breaths, the mind tends to calm down.
You're making me want to breathe deeply.
And there's physiological reasons behind this too. I mean, you're driving more oxygen to the brain, you're creating, more blood flow and so on. So I think that is a great first step to become more mindful.
Maybe I'll just go over what are the 3 key steps to belief change.
Please, yes.
So the first step is to identify the belief. And so this is where mindfulness comes in. And this is actually the hardest step for a lot of people. So that's where I wanted to make a contribution to the literature, because there was a lot of literature around, how do you reprogram your beliefs once you know what they are. Yeah. But there wasn't a lot of content around how do you figure out what they are.
Right.
And it is actually the hardest step. So that's why I wrote my book, The Abundance Code, which is how to bust the 7 money myths for a rich life now.
Right.
And the 7 money myths are what I was able to identify through my work with clients, as well as, my own personal experiences, these are the top 7 beliefs that most people have regarding money, success, wealth, deservingness, all of those issues. They're all tied up into this because money is a little bit of a proxy for what we feel we deserve to receive in life. Yeah, so there's many layers to it.
Could you share those 7 myths with us?
Sure. The very first one, I'll share. I might not be able to get through all 7 in the time that we've got, but certainly the core ones, the very core belief that is at the heart of all 7, really. This is what I call the origin belief of this kind of belief system, is the belief in scarcity. So that's the belief that says there is not enough. There's not enough to go around. There's, if I'm going to get enough, that means somebody else is going to not get enough.
Right.
And so this kicks up a whole system of competition, of jealousy, of envy. All those emotions are associated with this underlying belief that basically there's not enough to go around. And the pie is fixed. There's no way we're growing the pie, or some people even believe that the pie is shrinking. And so,
isn't it fixed though, Julie? Well, I can't help but ask that. Maybe we're picking up on something here, but
we might be. Here, let me ask you a question.
Yeah, go for it.
All right. Let's just look at technology. Now we're stepping into stage 2, actually. Okay. So let's do it for scarcity. The belief that there is not enough to go around. And this, money doesn't grow on trees, waste not, want not. They all tie into that belief, those sayings. So let's just take a counter example. This is step 2. Step 2 to belief change is identify it and then weaken it.
Okay, yep.
So how you weaken it, one way you can weaken it is just argue the counter case. Is it true all the time? Is it true for everyone?
That's a great
point. Has it always been true for me even?
And it's not true all the time. And actually, let me just clarify what I meant when I said, is the pie fixed? I was specifically thinking in terms of the 4 economic factors of production when you said it. So, what is it? Land, labor, capital, and enterprise. So I was thinking there are fixed amounts of those except enterprise.
Let me tell you why. Yeah. Economics is the science of managing scarce resources.
Correct.
Underneath everything in economics is the assumption of scarcity.
Correct.
That's an assumption.
Yes.
That doesn't mean it's a truth, but it is an assumption of that entire framework. Okay, so let's just argue against that.
Okay.
With one thing. How much energy does the sun pump out and deliver to our planet every single day?
I don't know how much, but I know it's a lot.
What if we had a way, might be called solar cell technology, of converting that sun energy into energy that we could use, with very little waste? What would that mean?
That would mean we have what we already have.
Right. And what if the efficiency of that doubled every couple of years?
Yeah, we'd be in a pretty good place, at least energy-wise.
Yeah. Do you know that that's already happening?
Yes.
Yeah. Does that mean we're in a fixed pie situation?
Absolutely not.
Okay. So there you go. You just completed step number 2. Step number 2 is to insert doubt around the absoluteness of that belief.
Yep.
And you can do it any way you want, Another way to do it, for example, it's not always something that you can attack with data, all right? But let's say you have a belief that I am not enough, because sometimes that's sitting underneath this belief of there is not enough.
Sure.
So that identity belief, I am not enough. I'm not okay just the way that I am. One way that you can start to weaken that belief is to go, wow, if I was a little innocent child of, say, 3 or 4, and I remove myself to the position of, say, parent of myself as child, would I say to myself, you are not enough?
No way.
No way.
Yeah.
If I was my own mentor, would I say to me, you are not enough?
No way.
If I was Gandhi, would I say to me, you are not enough?
No.
Was Gandhi not enough? Even though he never, used violence, he changed the entire course of history for a country.
Yeah. Well, he also changed the approach to what is traditionally called war, right? He started a different kind of war, which was non-cooperation and non-violent movement.
Right. So, yeah. Would he say you are not enough? No. So we can do things like that. We can pull ourselves out to a different perspective, a more compassionate perspective than the one we often hold ourselves in, and go, is this what I would teach a child? Is this what my mentor would teach me? Is this what a spiritual leader would teach me?
Right.
And often we can break it down that way.
Okay, great. So that's step 2.
That's step 2, weakening. Step 3 is overwriting. So we identify what the false belief was, or the limiting belief, maybe is a better way to put it. And we identify that actually that's not helpful for me to believe. And it's not even true, so you'd go through the weakening process. And then the third step is to go, well, what would be helpful for me to believe? What's a belief that would support me in achieving what it is that I want to achieve in my life? And for example, I have to work hard for my money. Does that help me? No, that locks me into a prison where I have to work hard all the time. Is that the life that I want?
No.
Well, no. Most people don't.
Time is money. That means you have to now, you're not only do you have to exchange your time for money, you're limited to 24 hours of earning money in a day.
Because that ain't a belief, that's a fact. There's only 24 hours in a day.
No, what I mean is if you're assuming that you have to exchange your time for money, then
the belief is the assumption that you have to.
Yeah. But if you believe that with information products, for example, you can make money, you're off the time for money treadmill.
Sure.
Which is
or recurrent revenue models and passive income strategies. Exactly. You can disconnect, or even having employees, you're leveraging other people's time. Investing.
Right.
Lots of ways to disconnect from the time is money prison. But you're not going to if you don't believe you can.
Sure.
So what would be a better belief? A better belief, for example, for time is money is, I can earn money without having to put much time into it. I can have lots of money flowing into my life from relatively little effort. Just coming back quickly to the overwriting process, because we're not quite done with that. You want to overwrite. So you decide, what's your new belief? So then how do you put it in? And here's one simple technique that works really well. And it's called the sleepy mind technique. So you take your new belief statement. You've already done steps 1 and 2. That's really important. You've already identified the limiting belief. You've already weakened it. Yep. And then you've identified what you want to put in its place. You write it on a card. You place it next to your bed. When you're going to sleep, when you're groggy, when you're drifting off, the veils are parted more at that time. There's more direct access to the subconscious mind at that time. Pick up the card, say it out loud, repeat it to yourself 2 or 3 times, put the card down, go to sleep. Wake up in the morning, you're still groggy. First thing you do is you pick that card up and you repeat it to yourself 2 or 3 more times. And then you get up and get on with your day. Do that for a week and you'll make a huge amount of progress on that belief. So
there's so much fantastic information you've given us. I'm going to actually try and summarize this, summarize our conversation, and then bring it into the action steps section of this conversation. So we started off by talking about your journey, and that alone was fascinating. You shared a lot of stuff that I didn't know, actually. All that stuff. I didn't know you guys own planes. That's amazing. And then we talked about your own journey and how you kind of tended to recreate that trauma that you experienced earlier on in your life in your business. And interestingly enough, found yourself at a similar point at the age of 40 where your parents were in terms of bankruptcy and so on. And that then led to your discovering the framework and really becoming aware of these 7 money myths that tend to disrupt a lot of our lives, which you saw through your company, Trading Pursuits. And the underlying theme below all of those 7 money myths was the idea that resources are limited and scarce, which interestingly I too kind of found I was leaning towards as well. So that brings us to our 3 steps to changing your beliefs. The first step is to identify your belief. So let's say the belief is that you don't think you're enough. So you identify the belief and you say, okay, I'm aware of the fact that I'm seeing patterns in my life where I'm showing signs of thinking that I'm not enough. My behavior seems to indicate that I keep questioning my value and my abilities. And one of the ways to do that, to identify that belief, is to use mindfulness and start practicing it. And I'll link to some mindfulness content in the show notes of this episode. The second step is to then weaken that belief after having identified it. So if you've identified I'm not enough is a belief that is in some way inhibiting you, you say, okay, now let's question that belief. Why do I think I'm not enough? What evidence can I find to challenge that belief that I'm not enough? It might have been that you helped somebody earlier in the day, or you might have done something good in your life. Every one of us has. You've accomplished something, you've faced some kind of adversity and triumphed over it. Whatever it is, you question it. And then the third step is to override that technique. And it's what you call the sleepy mind technique. And the simple, easy way to do it, you write it down on a note. I like the idea of using one of these system cards, which I'm holding up on the screen. You can get those bigger ones from Officeworks here in Australia, and you can stick it next to your bed, and you make sure you read it as you're falling asleep in that groggy phase. And then again, as you're waking up, you read it 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Anything else you would suggest?
Yeah, well, I think I would suggest that people read my book, which isn't a shameless plug for my book. It's really, I think it makes a significant contribution in terms of those 7 beliefs that hold most people back. I know you're a big fan of productivity and the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
I would say that this is the 80-20 rule for beliefs.
Nice.
Because most people have all of the 7. Many people have some of the 7. Interestingly, in my case, because I had grown up wealthy, I didn't have some of the early beliefs that hold people back from even manifesting wealth into their life in the first place, right? So I didn't have that barrier. I'd already experienced wealth. I already knew it was totally possible. So I believed in that already.
Yes.
What I had was the one that said every time you accumulate wealth, you'll lose it. Yes. And also when you're riding high in wealth, your personal life starts falling apart. So those were the ones that were tripping me up in a really bad way. So at any rate, identifying the top 7 beliefs that are holding you back is 80 or 90% of the battle. So. Right. So the book helps you do that. The book takes you through the counter argument process. So the book does step 1 for those top 7 beliefs. The book does step 2 for those top 7 beliefs. And then the book takes you through 7 different ways you can overwrite. The sleepy mind method being just one of those 7 techniques. Okay, now you've written 2 books. So this book is called The Abundance Code. And where can people get this book? On Amazon. Okay. It was published by Hay House. Okay. So it's available on Amazon, Kindle or paperback from most good online booksellers. Yeah. Okay. It came out a couple of years ago, so it might not still be on shelves.
Yep.
in bookstores, but can definitely get it on Amazon.
And then there's that awesome documentary as well.
Yeah, after I wrote the book, I wanted to do a documentary that kind of showcased 15 different stories of people who I know who have moved from the scarcity mindset to the abundance mindset. Mm-hmm. And the abundance mindset has specific characteristics. One of the characteristics is that people are not competitive when they reach that mindset. They're more collaborative.
Okay.
And very generous, and but there are a lot of characteristics, and I wanted to make a documentary showing all these different stories of how different people made that shift in their lives, because there's not one way to make a shift. There's many different ways. Everybody's on their own sort of hero's journey. And so I wanted to show a lot of inspirational stories of people. Some people I interviewed had been homeless. Wow. One guy was involved in a street gang. And these are people who are like luminaries now, who are visionaries in this area. So some people have had incredible transformations in their life through transforming their mindset around abundance.
So how does one get access to the documentary?
Well, you can go to theabundancecode.com, and on that site you can opt in to watch the first 10 minutes of the film, and then basically you can decide if you'd like to purchase the film from
Perfect. There. Okay, well, I'll add a link to that in the show notes as well.
I also write a blog about abundance, which can be accessed from theabundancecode.com.
Okay, cool. So we'll put a link to theabundancecode.com, the blog, so they can access both the documentary and the blog at theabundancecode.com.
Right. The opt-in is on the homepage. And if you go up to the menu, then you can, on the top right corner of the page, you can access the blog.
Well, my last two questions are normally, what books do you recommend and why? And we've already answered that. We've already got the two books. And the other one was going to be, how do people find out more about you? And we've answered that too. Is there any other website that you would like to recommend people check out besides theabundancecode.com?
Sure. If you want to understand more about the 7 money myths specifically, you're specifically interested in the book, then you can go to theabundancecodebook.com. And there's a series of 5 free videos available there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and I would love to have you back.
Thank you.